Good afternoon to all you beautiful people out there. How are you all doing today? I'm doing quite alright myself, and I really hope you're all doing good too. If you aren't, and you want to talk, I'm here if you need. If we're all good though, then I'm your host, Doodleman149, and welcome back to another viewer variance video. If you've been here before, you know the deal. In this series, I take viewer weapon builds and test them out in Core Domination, Ground War, and Warzone. Just in case any of you forgot, here's how I rate these builds. A5 isn't really a bad rating at all, so don't get upset if your build gets that. Pause the video if you need to get a better look at this chart. For today's build, we have a suggestion from a newer viewer, Cesar Maqueda, who offered up his Kilo 141 build. His build looks like the perfect blend of my Whisper and Rattler builds from my Gun Workshop video for this weapon. I'll leave a link to that video below if you're interested. So without further delay, let's hop right into this. Starting his build off in the barrel section, Cesar first suggests we go with the Kilo's Whisper barrel to improve our range while also suppressing the weapon. The FSS close quarter stock is the next suggestion in order to improve our ADS speed at the cost of stability. Stippled grip tape doubles down on the speed stock while also boosting our sprint to fire speed. After that, the 60 round magazines are used to double our ammo capacity at the cost of general mobility. This build is then finally rounded off by the Merc foregrip for increased recoil and hipfire control at the cost of, yet again, mobility. Initially, I thought this build would work extremely similarly to my Whisper build from my Kilo Gun Workshop video. I was incorrect on that note, however. Instead, this build works way better than my Whisper build, at least for Core Domination. The no stock option, after the nerf a while ago, has made Whisper far less versatile than Cesar's Kilo build here. The Whisper barrel itself is just a great attachment overall because of its slight range boost and sound suppression with negligible downsides. The close quarter stock is a better choice than the no stock option as it still boosts our ADS speed, keeping this build very snappy, without harming our recoil control at all. The stipple grip tape doubles down on the benefits of the CQC stock while also letting us run and gun a little more effectively by reducing our sprint out time. The 60 round magazines seem a little much since I don't think the extra 10 bullets are really worth the additional mobility penalties, but that's a minor concern, really. The Merc foregrip is a good choice for Core Domination since the smaller maps make hipfire more of a viable option sometimes, and this helps to tighten that up while also reducing our overall recoil. This build is fantastic for Core Domination. I had a great game with this build on a map that I'm not a big fan of. For Core Domination, Cesar Maqueda's Kilo 141 gets itself a perfect score, a 10 out of 10. When it comes to Ground War, Cesar's Kilo works really well in some situations and not too great in others. When it came to ranges typically seen in Core Domination, such as smaller areas of bigger maps and building interiors, this build was fantastic. When I tried to stretch out the range of this build, I was just finding it fairly difficult to hit a larger number of my shots. But luckily, I did have 60 rounds to burn over range, so I still usually got the kill. But I still think that perhaps some other recoil mitigating attachment on here would have been a good choice. This may be one of the only times I think I noticed just how much a lack of aiming stability can really throw off your aim. The stippled grip and the close quarter stock both fairly heavily harm aiming stability, but they make use up close that much easier. I think the Kilo's iron sights are very good in their own right, as I never found myself wishing I had an optic for this mode, which is something I found refreshing. This weapon could certainly be used in an anti-vehicle class since it's effective at a variety of ranges and can easily be paired with a rocket and thermites if you wish to play that way. While it suffers at range, this build is still extremely solid overall. For Ground War, this Kilo build earns itself an 8 out of 10. I was never a Kilo user when it comes to Warzone. It ended up being meta, so it was off limits in that regard, and before that, I was still just preferring my Scar and Uzi combo that I usually run. On top of that, I knew this wasn't everyone's ideal build for the Kilo when it comes to Warzone. But all that being said, this build was absolutely cleaning up in plunder. I wasn't really used to the Kilo's recoil, despite it being very manageable, but I just thought of something just now while I'm assembling this video. Most of the areas this build excelled in were close to mid-range engagements, pretty much exactly like Core Domination. When I was trying to long-range enemies with this build, I struggled a little, but in the close confines of Storage Town and in the surrounding area's open spaces, I was cleaning up with this build. Much like Catspore MP7 build, I had a ton of kills in a very short period of time before work. My teammates were less than useless, but maybe that's another reason I got so many kills. Maybe SBMM was working in my favor. I'm not going to hold that against this build, however. The Whisper barrel was great because it suppressed the Kilo while also boosting our range a little bit for those mid-range fights. The 60 round mags were basically a necessity, as the addition of armor meant that a base magazine simply wasn't going to be able to handle multiple foes. The Merc foregrip was also great for cutting down on our vertical recoil while also tightening our hipfire, something that actually saved me on at least one occasion. Overall, this is a very solid, close to mid-range kilo build, even for Warzone. This Kilo 141 racks up a 9 out of 10 for Warzone and Plunder. This build was another stellar example of an excellent off-meta build for a weapon that I typically don't give any thought to. I saw the attachments and expected to do well with what this build had, but I never expected it to be as good as it is. When I hopped into Azir Cave and took off with this build, I knew I was going to love it. With how good this build was for running and gunning in core domination, I knew I could utilize it in certain areas to be extremely effective, and I did. Flanking on Promenade and just generally being a frontline soldier in downtown, I was bringing the pain in ground war, and I was able to fight multiple teams effectively in Storage Town when it came to Plunder, even if my two teammates literally did nothing. There were a few times I wish this build was any different. Once you accept this build's small number of limitations, you'll fall in love with it just like I did. For a final rating, Cesar Maqueda's Kilo 141 gets itself a very high 9 out of 10. And that'll do it for my video on Cesar's Kilo build. I had some other Kilo suggestions prior to this one, but so far this is my favorite viewer variant for the Kilo. I had to give it a 10 in core domination because it honestly blew my Whisper build right out of the water, although I suspect that's partly due to the build being formed before the no stock nerf. Regardless, I can't hold that against this build. In its own right, this Kilo is a very well-rounded weapon for a variety of ranges. This build makes the most of its mid-range capabilities while maintaining a speed needed for close quarters fights. If you have the Kilo Max and aren't sure what to put on it for some variety, I highly recommend this build. And with that, I'll be leaving you all here. I really enjoyed making this video, and I really hoped you all enjoyed watching it. A big shout out again to Cesar Maqueda for a fantastic Kilo build. If any of you out there really enjoyed this, be sure to leave a thumbs up and even subscribe for more great Modern Warfare content. I hope you're all having a great day and a great week. I've been your host, Doodleman149, and until next time, I will see you later.